shot down the Austrian Prime Minister in 1916, and who had been reprieved. Others too were stoic. Grigory Benchtok, Semyon Weinstein, arrested several times, they were eventually expelled from the country. In February 1921, in Petrograd, the Mensheviks certainly supported the deceived and hungry workers. They pushed them to protest and strike, but without any real conviction, and they lacked audacity to take the lead of the Kronstadt insurrection. However, this did not in any way protect them from repression. We also know a lot of Mensheviks who joined the Bolsheviks, who exchanged one party label for another. They were Boris Magomedov. He became head of the political section in the 10th Army, then Donbass, secretary of the provincial committees of Poltava, Samara, instructor on the Central Committee. Abram Deborin, a true defector. He rapidly climbed the echelons of a career of red professor, stuffing our heads with dialectical materialism and historical materialism. Alexander Goik-Barg, member of the Soviet Revolutionary Committee, public prosecutor at the trial of the ministers of Kolchak, member of the College of the Commissariat for Justice, then president of the Little Sovnarkom. Some of them held out for some time until their arrest, such as I. Lyakovetsky Maisky. The others, in great numbers, were reduced very easily to silence. From the trial of the imaginary Unified Menshevik Bureau of 1931, where we find Guimer Sukhanov, who was the designer of the tactics of the Executive Committee in March 1917. A huge raid was organized throughout the Union to apprehend them. There were defectors in the SR, Lakov Lifshitz, for example, vice president of the Chernigov Cheka in 1919, then Kharkov, then president of the Kiev Cheka, and, at the height of a rapid career, vice president of the Ukrainian GPU. There was anarchist communists, the most famous being Lazar Kogan, special section of the armies, assistant to the chief of the army of the Vecheka in 1930, senior official of the Gulag, and, in 1931, chief of the White Sea shipyard of the NKVD. There are extremely sinuous biographies. Ilya Kitvitenko, a lieutenant in the Austrian army, taken prisoner by the Russians, and from the moment the Bolsheviks are in power, takes his ranks at the Cheka, Guepoe, and then in the army, and in 1930 was one of the reformers of the Red Army, and then in the whole for 20 years. And what about the Zionists? Let us remember in 1906 they had posited and proclaimed that they could not stay away from the Russians' fight against the yoke of the autocracy, and they had actively engaged in the said battle. This did not prevent them, in May 1918, when the yoke still weighed so heavily, to declare that, in matters of Russian domestic policy, they would henceforth be neutral, very obviously in the hope of avoiding the risk that the Bolsheviks would accuse them of being counter-revolutionaries. And at first, it worked. Throughout the year 1918 and during the first 6 months of 1919, the Bolsheviks left them alone. In the summer of 1918, they were able to hold the All-Russian Congress of Jewish Communities in Moscow, and hundreds of these communities had their Palestinian Week. Their newspapers appeared freely, and a youth club, the Heraluts, was created. But in the spring of 1919, local authorities undertook to ban the Zionist press here and there, and in the autumn of 1919, a few prominent figures were accused of espionage for the benefit of England. In the spring of 1920, the Zionists organized a pan-Russian conference in Moscow. Result? All the participants, 90 people, were interned in the Butyrka prison. Some were condemned, but the penalty was not applied, following the intervention of a delegation of Jewish syndicates from America.